Jake Morrison stood at the observation deck of the massive space station called New Harmony. Through the thick glass, he could see ships arriving from every corner of the galaxy. Some were sleek and silver like needles. Others were huge and dark, like floating mountains. A few glowed with strange colors that hurt his eyes to look at directly. He had never seen so many different alien ships in one place. Each one carried representatives from worlds he could barely pronounce the names of. They were all coming here for one reason. The galaxy was in trouble and everyone was scared. Jake touched the communication device on his collar. Ambassador Grant, the Kalari warships just arrived. That makes 47 different species now docked at the station. Lisa Grant's tired voice came through the speaker. "Thank you, Jake. How do they look?" Jake watched as 6 massive Kalari battleships took position near the station. Their hulls were covered in spikes and weapon ports, like they're ready for a fight. Lisa sighed. They probably are. The Kalari always think fighting is the answer to everything. Jake had been working as Lisa's assistant for 2 years now. He used to be a soldier before he became a diplomat. Sometimes he missed the simple life of following orders. Being a diplomat meant dealing with problems that had no clear answers. The doors behind him opened with a soft hiss. Commander Alex Rodriguez walked in, his blue uniform crisp and clean. Alex was the captain of Terra's Pride, the human ship that had brought them to New Harmony. "Jake, you need to see this," Alex said. His face looked worried. "The news feeds are going crazy. 3 more worlds went dark in the outer rim." Jake felt his stomach drop. "The Void Syndicate?" Alex nodded. "Has to be. Same pattern as before. All communication stops, then nothing. When scout ships finally get there, the planets are empty. No bodies, no signs of fighting. Just empty cities and dead silence. The Void Syndicate had appeared 6 months ago. Nobody knew where they came from or what they wanted. They would arrive at a planet, and within days every living thing would be gone. Not killed, not destroyed. Just gone. Like they had never existed at all." "How many does that make now?" Jake asked. 37 worlds, Alex said quietly. "Over 2 billion people just vanished." Jake stared out at the alien ships. Each one represented billions more lives that could disappear if they didn't find a way to stop the syndicate. The problem was that nobody could agree on how to do it. Though, communication device crackled again. "Jake, please report to the council chamber," Lisa's voice said. "We're about to start the emergency session." The council chamber was the largest room Jake had ever seen. It was shaped like a huge bowl with seats going up in circles around a central speaking area. Each section was designed for different types of aliens. Some needed water to breathe. Others required special lights or different gravity. Jake took his seat in the human section, which was small compared to most others. Humans were still new to galactic politics. Most aliens barely paid attention to them. Lisa stood at the human delegation's table. She looked exhausted. Her usually perfect hair was messy and her clothes were wrinkled. She had been working nonstop for 3 days trying to prepare for this meeting. "Remember," she whispered to Jake, "we're here to listen and learn. Don't speak unless I ask you to. These species have been dealing with each other for thousands of years. We're the newcomers." The chamber filled with noise as the different aliens took their places. The Zephyrians buzzed and hummed in their strange language. They looked like giant bees, but were actually a hive mind that shared thoughts across their entire species. When one Zephyrian learned something, they all knew it instantly. The Vortani delegates glowed with soft blue light. They were made of living crystal and communicated by changing colors and making musical sounds. Right now their colors were shifting rapidly between red and orange, which Jake had learned meant they were angry or afraid. The Kalari section was the loudest. These aliens looked like giant cats that walked on 2 legs. They had sharp claws and fangs, and they liked to show them when they talked. Their leader, a huge female named War Chief Thrakmor, was already shouting at the Zephyrian delegation. "The bug minds want us to run and hide," Thrakmor roared. "The Kalari do not run from anything." The Zephyrian speaker, a drone named Buzzed97, buzzed back in its mechanical voice. "The hive calculates that direct confrontation has only a 12% chance of success. Strategic withdrawal allows for better positioning. Cowards, Thrackmore spat. You would let the Syndicate take more worlds while you make your calculations. Other species began joining the argument. The Helix delegation, who looked like walking snakes, hissed their displeasure. The Gornak representatives, massive bear-like creatures, growled and showed their teeth. Soon the entire chamber was filled with shouts, roars, buzzes, and other sounds Jake couldn't identify. Ambassador Lisa stood up. Please everyone, we need to work together on this. But nobody was listening. The arguments got louder and angrier. Jake watched as centuries of diplomatic relationships began to crack under pressure. A Vortani delegate suddenly flashed bright red and let out a high-pitched musical note that made everyone cover their ears. When the sound stopped, the crystal being spoke in its singing voice. The harmony is broken. If we cannot agree here, the Syndicate will consume us all. One world at a time. Thrackmore stood up, her claws extended. Then maybe it's time to find out who the real warriors are. The Kalari will not bow to these shadow thieves. And when your worlds are empty and silent, Bist 97 replied, the Hive will remember that pride comes before extinction. The chamber erupted again. This time some delegates began walking toward the exits. Jake watched in horror as the alliance that was supposed to save the galaxy began falling apart before his eyes. Lisa grabbed his arm. Jake, help me get to the podium. Maybe I can... She never finished the sentence. The stress and exhaustion of the past week finally caught up with her. Ambassador Lisa Grant, humanity's voice in the galactic community, collapsed right there in the council chamber. As medical teams rushed to help her, Jake realized that humanity might soon have no voice at all in deciding the galaxy's fate. Jake Morrison sat alone in the medical bay waiting room. Through the glass door he could see Ambassador Lisa Grant lying in the hospital bed. Wires and tubes connected her to alien medical machines that beeped softly. The doctor, a tall, blue-skinned, Helix named Dr. Seskalar, had said she would be fine, but she needed rest. Complete exhaustion, the snake-like doctor had explained. Her body shut down from stress and lack of sleep. She will recover, but not for several days. Jake stared at his hands. In 2 hours, the Galactic Council would meet again. Without Lisa, humanity would have no one to speak for them. The other human diplomats were still traveling from Earth and wouldn't arrive for another week. His communication device buzzed. Jake, this is Tony Baker on Terra's Pride. Captain Rodriguez wants to speak with you. Jake pressed the reply button. Put him through. Alex's voice came through clearly. Jake, I just got word from Earth Command. They're recalling all senior diplomats for emergency meetings. That leaves you as our only representative until reinforcements arrive. Alex, I can't do this, Jake said. I'm just an assistant. These aliens barely know I exist. You're what we have, Alex replied. And Jake, there's something else. Intelligence reports say the Void Syndicate is moving faster than before. They hit 2 more systems overnight. We're running out of time. Jake closed his eyes. When he was a soldier, his job was simple: point, shoot, follow orders. Now he was supposed to represent all of humanity in front of beings who had been playing galactic politics since before humans discovered fire. The medical bay doors opened. Dr. Emma Phillips walked in carrying a large tablet computer. Emma was a xenobiologist who studied how different alien species communicated. She had been working with the human delegation to help them understand alien behavior. Jake, I heard about Ambassador Grant, Emma said. How are you holding up? Terrified, Jake admitted. Emma, I don't know the first thing about diplomatic protocol. Half these species can kill me just by breathing on me wrong. Emma sat down next to him. Maybe that's not a bad thing. What do you mean? Emma activated her tablet. Images of different alien species appeared on the screen. I've been studying the communication patterns of all 47 species here. Want to know what I've learned? Jake nodded. They're all scared, Emma said. Every single one of them. The Kalari act aggressive because they're terrified of looking weak. The Zephyrians calculate everything because they're afraid of making the wrong choice. The Vortani glow different colors when they're stressed because they can't control their emotions. She swiped to a new image showing brain scans. Fear makes beings act in predictable ways. They get defensive. They stop listening to each other. They make decisions based on what might go wrong instead of what could go right. That sounds like the council session so far, Jake said. Exactly. And you know what else? None of them understand humans yet. They see us as weak because we don't have natural weapons or armor. They think we're stupid because our technology isn't as advanced as theirs. Jake frowned. That doesn't make me feel better. Emma smiled. But they're wrong. Humans have something none of these species have. We've learned how to work with our enemies. Think about Earth's history, Jake. How many times did humans fight wars, then become allies later? Jake thought about it. In America and Britain had fought a war, then became close friends. Germany and Japan had been enemies in World War II, then became strong allies. You think that matters here? I think it's the only thing that matters, Emma said. These species have been fighting the same battles for thousands of years. They can't imagine working with someone they don't trust completely. But humans do. It all the time. Jake's communication device buzzed again. Jake, this is Tony. You need to get to the council chamber. The session is starting, and they're asking where the human representative is. Jake stood up slowly. Emma, what if I say the wrong thing? Then you'll be just like every other diplomat in there, Emma replied. The difference is, you might also say the right thing. The council chamber was even more tense than before. Many of the species that had left yesterday hadn't returned. The ones that were there sat far apart from each other, like children who had been fighting. Jake walked to the human section. The other delegates barely noticed him. To them, he was just another minor aide from a minor species. War Chief Thrackmore was speaking loudly from the Kalari section. 3 more worlds died while we sat here talking. The Kalari fleet will leave in 6 hours to hunt these shadow thieves. Any who wish to fight with honor may follow us. Biz 97 buzzed in response. The Hive has calculated the Syndicate's movement patterns. Direct assault will result in the destruction of 87% of attacking forces. This course of action is mathematically unsound. Your mathematics didn't save the children of Kepler Station. Thrackmore roared. The Vortani delegation began glowing angry red colors. Their speakers sang in their musical language. The crystal song mourns for the lost voices, but grief fire will not burn away the shadow bringers. Jake watched as the arguments started again. Each species had their own plan, and none of them matched. The Kalari wanted to attack immediately. The Zephyrians wanted to retreat and study the enemy. The Vortani wanted to build defensive barriers around their most important worlds. A hologram flickered to life at the human table. General Patricia Hayes appeared, her image transmitted from Earth. Jake, I'm sorry to put this pressure on you, but you're all we have right now. Earth Command is sending everything we can, but our ships won't arrive for days. General, I'm not qualified for this, Jake whispered. Son, none of us are qualified for this, Patricia replied. But sometimes the person who needs to speak up is the one who doesn't think they're ready. Jake looked around the chamber. The Gornak delegation was now arguing with the Helix representatives. 2 more species had gotten up to leave. Soon there would be nobody left to coordinate any kind of defense. He thought about what Emma had said. All these beings were scared. They were making decisions based on fear instead of hope. They couldn't.
Imagine working with people they didn't completely trust, but humans had learned that lesson long ago. Sometimes you had to trust your enemies to fight a bigger enemy. Sometimes the person you hated yesterday became your best ally today. Jake stood
up. His heart was pounding so hard he was sure everyone could hear it. He looked at the chaos around him and made a decision that would change everything. It was time to find out if one human voice could cut through thousands of years of galactic politics. But first, he had to find the courage to use it. Jake Morrison stood up from his chair in the human section. At first, nobody noticed. The chamber was too loud with arguments and angry voices. War Chief Thrackmore was shouting at the Zephyrian delegation while her claws scraped against the metal podium. The Vortani were flashing bright red and orange colors that hurt to look at. Half the species were threatening to leave, and the other half were making plans to attack each other. Jake began walking toward the center of the chamber. His legs felt weak, like they might give out at any moment. His hands were shaking, but he kept them at his sides. Each step felt like it took forever. A few delegates noticed him moving. The Helix representative, Dr. S.S. Kalar, tilted his snake-like head curiously. Some of the smaller species looked up from their arguing to see what the human was doing. Jake reached the speaking platform in the center of the chamber. It was a raised circle surrounded by all the alien delegations. Standing there, he felt very small and very alone. 46 different species surrounded him, most of them bigger, stronger, and more advanced than humans. He didn't ask for permission to speak. He didn't wait for someone to give him the floor. He simply opened his mouth and began talking. "I'm scared," Jake said. His voice wasn't loud, but something about it made a few more aliens stop arguing and look at him. The chamber was still mostly chaos, but a small bubble of quiet formed around the speaking platform. "I'm scared," Jake said again, a little louder this time. "I'm scared that we're going to sit here arguing while more worlds die. I'm scared that we're going to let fear make our decisions for us." War Chief Thrackmore stopped shouting at the Zephyrians and turned to look at the human. "What did you say, Softskin?" Jake looked directly at her. Thrackmore was twice his size, with claws that could cut through steel and fangs that could bite through bone. But Jake didn't look away. "I said I'm scared," Jake repeated. "And I think you are too." The chamber went quieter. More aliens were paying attention now. Thrackmore's claws extended further from her fingers. "The Kalari fear nothing," she growled. "Yes, you do," Jake said calmly. "You're terrified that if you don't attack immediately, everyone will think you're weak. You're scared that other species will see the Kalari as cowards who talk big, but run when real danger comes." Thrackmore took a step toward the platform. Her whole body was tense, ready to fight. But Jake kept talking. "And you," Jake said, turning to the Zephyrian delegation. "You're scared too. You calculate everything because you're afraid of making the wrong choice. You've run probability models on every possible plan, but they all show bad outcomes, so you freeze up and can't decide anything." Bizit 97's mechanical voice buzzed. "The Hive does not experience fear as individual organisms do." "Maybe not," Jake said, "but you experience something like it. The terror of being wrong, of making a decision that gets your people killed. So you keep calculating, hoping the numbers will change." The chamber was getting quieter. Even the species that had been preparing to leave stopped moving toward the exits. Something about this human's voice was different from the usual diplomatic speeches. Jake turned to face the Vortani delegation. Their crystal bodies were still glowing red and orange, but the colors were shifting more slowly now. "And you're scared of losing your harmony," Jake said to them. "Your whole culture is based on working together, singing together, being in perfect balance. This crisis threatens to break that balance, and you don't know how to handle it." The Vortani speaker let out a soft musical note that sounded almost like a sigh. The crystal song acknowledges truth in the human's words. Now the chamber was mostly quiet. Delegates who had been shouting minutes before were listening to what Jake had to say. He could feel their attention focused on him like a physical weight. "No, you're all scared," Jake continued, "because I recognize it. I see the same fear in you that I see in myself. The fear of making the wrong choice. The fear of looking weak. The fear of losing everything you care about." Jake paused and looked around the chamber. 46 different species, with different bodies, different minds, different ways of thinking. But they all had one thing in common. "Here's what I've learned about fear," Jake said. "It makes you stupid. When you're scared, you stop thinking clearly. You make decisions based on what might go wrong instead of what could go right. You see enemies everywhere, even when you're looking at potential friends." War Chief Thrackmore's claws retracted slightly. "What would you have us do, human? Sit here and talk while the Syndicate destroys more worlds?" "I would have us work together," Jake said simply. "I would have us stop seeing each other as threats and start seeing each other as allies." "Impossible," Bizit 97 buzzed. The species represented here have fundamental conflicts that cannot be resolved. Do they? Jake asked. Or do you just think they can't be resolved because you've been fighting the same battles for so long that you can't imagine anything else? Jake stepped closer to the edge of the platform. On my world, we have a saying. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. We've learned that sometimes you have to work with people you don't like to fight something worse. He pointed up at the ceiling, toward the stars beyond. Out there, the Void Syndicate is erasing entire civilizations. They don't care if you're Kalari or Zephyrian or Vortani. They don't care about your politics or your history or your pride. They just want to make you disappear. The chamber was completely silent now. Every alien in the room was focused on Jake's words. So here's my question, Jake said. Are you going to let them win because you can't stand the thought of working with each other? Are you going to let fear and pride destroy everything you've built across thousands of years? Jake looked directly at War Chief Thrakmor. Chief, you say the Kalari are warriors, but what kind of warrior lets their enemy win without a fight? Then he turned to Bzet-97. And you say you calculate probabilities. What's the probability of survival if we keep fighting each other instead of the real threat? Finally, he faced the Vortani delegation. And you talk about harmony. How can there be harmony if half the galaxy goes silent? Jake stepped back to the center of the platform. His heart was still pounding, but his voice was steady. I'm just a human, he said. My species is young and weak compared to most of you, but we've learned something that might help. We've learned that the strongest alliances are often formed between former enemies. We've learned that trust doesn't come from being the same, but from choosing to work together despite being different. The silence stretched on. Jake had said everything he could think of. Now he had to wait and see if any of it had made a difference. War Chief. Thrakmor spoke first. Human, she said slowly. What exactly are you proposing? Jake Morrison looked at War Chief Thrakmor. The giant cat-like alien was staring at him with yellow eyes that could see in complete darkness. Her claws were still extended, but they weren't pointed at him anymore. They were resting on the arm of her chair like she was thinking hard about something. What am I proposing? Jake repeated her question. I'm proposing that we stop trying to fight this war the way we've always fought wars. He turned to face the entire chamber. Every alien delegate was watching him now. Even the ones who had been ready to leave were still in their seats. The Void Syndicate isn't like any enemy you've faced before, Jake continued. They don't want your territory, they don't want your resources, they don't even want to rule you. They just want you gone, completely gone. Lieutenant Dan Foster's voice came through Jake's communication device so quietly that only he could hear it. Jake, I'm monitoring all the alien communication channels. They're not talking to each other anymore. They're all listening to you. Jake took a deep breath. So we need to think differently. Instead of each species trying to protect their own worlds with their own methods, we need to use what makes each of you special. Bzet-97's mechanical voice filled the chamber. Explain this concept, human Jake Morrison. The Zephyrians are the best at sharing information instantly across vast distances, Jake said. Your hive mind means that when one of you learns something, all of you know it immediately. That's not a weakness. That's the perfect early warning system. The buzzing from the Zephyrian section became more excited. Jake had learned that when they buzzed faster, it meant they were interested. The Kalari are the best warriors in the galaxy, Jake continued, looking at Thrakmor. But you've always fought alone with just your own fleets. What if you had perfect information about where the enemy was going to be before they got there? Thrakmor's ears twitched forward. In Kalari body language, that meant she was paying very close attention. And the Vortani, Jake said, turning. To the crystal beings, your harmonic communication can reach across entire star systems instantly. No delay, no interference. What if that became the backbone of a unified fleet command? The Vortani speaker's crystal body began glowing a soft blue color. Professor Nancy Johnson had taught Jake that blue meant they were feeling hopeful. I see what you're trying to do, human, said Dr. SSS Kalar from the Helix delegation. But These species have been enemies for centuries. The Kalari and Zephyrians fought a war that lasted 300 years. How do you expect them to work together now? Jake smiled for the first time since he'd started speaking. Because they have to, and because my species has already proven it can work. He activated his communication device so everyone could hear. Captain Rodriguez, are you listening? Alex's voice came through clearly. Yes, Jake, we're all listening. Tell them about the human fleet that brought us here. Well, Alex said, Terra's Pride has a crew of 450 people from 37 different nations on Earth. My first officer is from Russia. My chief engineer is from Japan. My medical officer is from Nigeria. 200 years ago, some of these countries were at war with each other. Jake nodded. My great-great-grandfather fought against Germans in World War II. My communications officer, Tony Baker's great-great-grandfather, was German. Now we work together every day. The chamber was completely quiet. Jake could tell the aliens were thinking about what this meant. But it goes deeper than that, Jake continued. Captain Rodriguez, tell them about Lieutenant Foster. Dan Foster is our intelligence officer, Alex said. His grandfather was American military. His grandmother was Vietnamese. During the Vietnam War, they were on opposite sides. Now their grandson serves on a human starship protecting Earth. Jake looked around the chamber. We learned something important on Earth. The people who used to be your enemies often make the best allies. They understand how you think because they used to fight against you. They know your weaknesses, but they also know your strengths. War Chief Thrackmore stood up slowly. You're saying the Kalari should trust the bug minds who calculated ways to kill us for 3 centuries? I'm saying the Zephyrians know exactly how Kalari warriors think in battle, Jake replied. And you know exactly how their calculations work. Together, you could create battle plans that no enemy could predict. Beast 97 buzzed loudly. The Hive has never considered this possibility. Kalari tactical instincts combined with Zephyrian strategic analysis could produce optimal results, and the Vortani harmonic networks could coordinate everything in real time, Jake added. No delays, no miscommunication, no confusion. Dr. Michelle Brown's voice came through Jake's earpiece. Jake, I'm reading the stress indicators from all the alien delegates. Their fear responses are dropping. You're actually getting through to them. Jake felt a surge of hope. Maybe this crazy idea could actually work. Here's what I'm really proposing, Jake said. Stop thinking about this as 47 different species trying to coordinate. Start thinking about it as one galaxy-wide organism with 47 different abilities. He pointed to the Gornak delegation. The Gornak have the strongest ships and the best shields. They become our mobile fortresses. Then he pointed to the small, quick aliens in the corner. The Pixari have the fastest scouts and the best sensors. They become our eyes and ears. The Helix have the best medical knowledge, Jake continued. They keep everyone healthy and help coordinate the biological needs of different species working together. One by one, Jake went through every species in the chamber. He showed how their greatest strengths could work together instead of competing against each other. But what about command structure? Asked the Gornak representative. Who leads this alliance? Everyone, Jake said simply. Each species leads in the area where they're strongest. The Kalari lead combat operations. The Zephyrians lead intelligence and planning. The Vortani lead communications. The Gornak lead fleet logistics. And what about humans? Thrackmore asked. What do your people lead? Jake thought for a moment. We help everyone else remember that they're on the same side. We've had a lot of practice at that. The chamber stayed quiet for a long time. Jake could see the aliens thinking, calculating, considering possibilities they had never imagined before. Finally, War Chief Thrackmore spoke. Human Jake Morrison, this plan is either brilliant or completely insane. On Earth, we've learned that the best plans are usually both, Jake replied. Thrackmore's mouth opened, showing her fangs. Jake had learned that this was how Kalari smiled. Then perhaps it's time to try something brilliant and insane. The silence that followed was different from before. It wasn't the silence of anger or fear. It was the silence of beings who were beginning to imagine a future they had never thought possible. Jake had given them hope. Now he had to help them turn that hope into action. Jake Morrison stepped back from the speaking platform. His legs felt weak and his heart was beating so fast he thought everyone in the chamber could hear it. He had said everything he could think of. Now he could only wait and see what would happen. The silence that filled the chamber was unlike anything Jake had ever experienced. It wasn't the angry quiet from before, when species were too mad to speak. It wasn't the scared silence of beings who didn't know what to do. This was something deeper. 46 different species sat in complete stillness. The Kalari weren't showing their claws. The Zephyrians weren't buzzing. The Vortani had stopped flashing colors. Even the small, nervous Pixari sat perfectly still, in their tiny chairs. Jake looked around the chamber. Each alien face was different, but they all had the same expression. They were thinking, really thinking, maybe for the first time since the crisis began. The silence stretched on. 1 minute passed, then 2, then 5. Jake began to wonder if he had made a terrible mistake. Maybe his words had been too strange, too foreign for these ancient civilizations to understand. Major Paul Anderson's voice whispered through Jake's earpiece. "Jake, I'm monitoring communication channels from all the alien ships. They're not talking to each other, but they're not preparing to leave either. They're just thinking." Finally, after what felt like hours but was probably only 10 minutes, someone spoke. It was Dr. Sas Kalar, the snake-like Helix representative. "Human Jake Morrison," the alien said slowly. "In 800 years of galactic diplomacy, I have never heard anyone speak the way you just did." Jake's stomach dropped. "I'm sorry if I said something wrong. I'm not trained in—" "You misunderstand," Dr. Ses Kalar interrupted. "You spoke about fear without shame. You admitted weakness without apologizing. You saw strength in what we thought were our greatest problems." War Chief Thrackmore stood up from her chair. For a moment, Jake thought she was going to challenge him to a fight. Instead, she did something that shocked everyone in the chamber. She bowed her head slightly, the Kalari sign of respect for a worthy opponent. "I have been a warrior for 60 years, Thrackmore said. "I have fought in 37 battles and led the Kalari fleet through 2 wars. But I never thought to ask the bug minds how they would plan those battles." Bizit 97's mechanical voice buzzed with what Jake had learned was amusement. "And the Hive never considered that Kalari instincts could improve our calculations. We thought warrior impulse was the opposite of logical analysis." "But they're not opposite," Jake said quietly. "They're 2 parts of the same thing. Good tactics need both quick thinking and careful planning." The Vortani speaker began to glow with soft, shifting colors. "The crystal song sees harmony where we saw only discord. The human shows us that different voices can sing together." Other aliens began to speak. Not arguing this time, but asking questions. Real questions about how Jake's plan could work. How would we coordinate supply lines between species with different atmospheric needs? Asked the Gornak representative. "The Helix medical knowledge could help with that," Jake replied. "They understand the biology of every species here. They could design supply systems that work for everyone." "What about command protocols?" asked a delegate from the Centauri system. "Our species has very different ideas about hierarchy and authority." "Maybe that's good," Jake said. "Different command styles for different situations. The Kalari way for direct combat, the Zephyrian way for long-term planning, the Vortani way for coordinating complex operations." Dr. Michelle Brown's voice came through Jake's earpiece. "Jake, something incredible is happening. I'm monitoring the stress indicators from all the alien delegates. Their fear levels are dropping to almost normal. You've actually done it." "But," Jake barely heard her. He was watching something amazing happen in the chamber. Species that had been enemies for centuries were talking to each other. Really talking. Not just arguing. A small Pixari delegate stood up on her chair to be seen. "The Pixari scout networks could work with Zephyrian information systems. We could create an early warning network that covers the entire galaxy. And Kalari battle fleets could be positioned based on that information," Thrackmore added. "We could be waiting for the Syndicate instead of chasing them." The Vortani harmonic communications could connect everything instantly, sang the crystal being. No delays, no lost messages, no confusion. Jake watched as the plan began to take shape. Not his plan anymore, but their plan. Each species adding their own ideas, their own strengths, their own solutions to problems they had never tried to solve together before. 3 hours later, the chamber was filled with the sound of cooperation. Aliens who had been ready to go to war with each other were now making plans to fight together. The Gornak were discussing ship designs with the Helix. The Centauri were coordinating sensor networks with the Pixari. Vice Admiral Robert Stone's voice came through the communication system. "Jake, this is Earth Command. We're receiving reports from across the galaxy. Word of what happened in that chamber is spreading. Species that weren't even at the meeting are asking to join the Alliance." Jake felt a mix of amazement and exhaustion. "How many?" 12 more species in the last hour, Admiral Stone replied. "And Jake, there's something else." The Void Syndicate hit another system this morning, but this time something different happened. What? The Kalari fleet was already there waiting for them. The Zephyrians had calculated their target 3 days ago. It was the first time anyone has been ready for a Syndicate attack. Jake's communication device crackled again. This time it was Captain Rodriguez. "Jake, you need to see this. The Syndicate ships retreated. They actually retreated. Nobody has ever seen them do that before." The chamber gradually grew quiet again as the news spread. The first battle of the new Galactic Alliance had been won without firing a shot. The Syndicate had faced organized resistance for the first time and decided to look for easier targets. War Chief Thrackmore approached Jake. "Human, you have done something remarkable here. You have given us hope when we had none." "I just said what I saw," Jake replied. "You all did the hard work." "No," Biz 97 buzzed. "You showed us how to see ourselves differently. That is perhaps the most valuable skill in the galaxy." 3 months later, Jake Morrison stood on the observation deck of New Harmony again. But this time he wasn't alone. Ambassador Lisa Grant was with him, fully recovered and amazed by what had happened while she was in the hospital. Through the glass, they could see the largest fleet in galactic history. Ships from 63 different species, all working together under the unified command structure that had grown from Jake's simple idea. "The Syndicate hasn't taken a single world in 6 weeks, Lisa said. "Intelligence reports say they're retreating to the Outer Rim, looking for undefended systems that don't exist anymore." Jake nodded. "Turns out that when you stop fighting each other, you have a lot more resources to fight the real enemy." His communication device buzzed. It was a message from Earth Command offering him promotion to Senior Ambassador and command of humanity's largest diplomatic mission. Jake turned off the device without reading the rest of the message. "Not interested?" Lisa asked. Jake smiled. "I think I'll stick to being an assistant for a while. Besides, the real work is just beginning. Keeping 63 species working together is going to be harder than getting them to agree in the first place." As he spoke, Jake looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, the Void Syndicate was still a threat. But for the first time since the crisis began, the galaxy was united, not because they were all the same, but because they had learned to value their differences. And it had all started with one human who stood before the galaxy and dared to speak the truth about fear, hope, and the courage to trust your enemies. Nobody had dared interrupt because sometimes the most important words come from the most unexpected voices.